So let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining. This, I think, will be particularly fun and educational. We have Justin Mullen, who is CEO and co-founder of DataOps.live. Justin is coming in from London. Mark Vandewiel, who is the field CTO with Fivetran and came on board. I think Mark was you can correct me, Mark, a co-founder of HVR, which Fivetran acquired. We have Saket Saram, who is CEO and co-founder of Nexla, and Taylor McGrath, who VP of Solutions Engineering at Rivery, and also Mike Pickett, VP of Growth at StreamSets. So a lot of folks here, a lot of expertise, not enough time, but let's dig in here. And I want to start with Mark. Mark, maybe you could tell us, you're with HVR and Fivetran, both started about a decade ago. And I would love your perspective on how the challenges facing data engineering teams have evolved over the last decade.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. That is a great question, and it's actually been a very exciting journey from my perspective. Now, I do want to correct, I was not one of the co-founders of HVR. I was one of the very early employees, and I was the first employee based in the United States, but I was not one of the co-founders. Now, in 2012, so with HVR, I was with HVR at the time, we saw very little cloud at that time, right? Like at the time, people were doing on-premise environments, and we saw a lot of data integration opportunities there. With Fivetran, you have to realize that we were founded in 2012, but we didn't find product market fit until 2015. And then with Fivetran, we kind of rode the wave. First, like AWS Redshift became the initial destination, and we saw adoption with HVR on that side as well. And then, of course, then Snowflake and Databricks, like the other cloud platforms, became highly popular, BigQuery, et cetera. Now, where do I see how we evolved here is, I think, first of all, there's more fragmentation in data sources today than there was even back in 2012. So people start using more SaaS applications for unique use cases, whether it's HR or expenses or different marketing tools, etc. Coming from the HR side, we saw an increase in volume, like I think possibly an order of magnitude more data changes today than we saw in 2012. And then the last challenge that I think we deal with now as data practitioners is the how can we manage self-service? So how can we enable our analysts so that, let's say, as a data engineer or even as the IT team, we're no longer the bottleneck. We enable these teams to start servicing themselves.
Great stuff. Okay, so thank you. And so Mike, let's rotate to you. I'd love to understand from your perspective at StreamSets more about the challenges of managing data pipelines across hybrid and multi-cloud environments.
Yeah.
If we could all start tomorrow fresh on the cloud, great. Most enterprises don't have that luxury, and I would love to hear your thoughts.
Definitely. It is exciting hearing a lot of companies these days talk about they are all in on the cloud, and that is fantastic. But data gravity, there still is a huge amount, especially in the larger enterprises, and that's just going to be a process. And I would say we've gone through the fast part of it, and now is the more challenging as companies kind of start looking deeper and deeper into their data sources. And the challenges that we see, and we help companies address, first, it's secure access. We work with a lot of companies in regulated industries, so securing the data and managing and not ever letting control go of their data. It needs to stay within their controlled environments. And then from there, we see a lot of companies are, how do I design pipelines that have set logic that I can reuse and redeploy in a scalable environment? And that's one of the things we help companies do, is design pipelines with set logic, set parameters that they can then deploy out to their different business groups that want to, say, access certain systems and use that data in their different analytics. That's slightly on the governance side, but being able to design once and then deploy many. And then seeing the data supply chain is what we call it, having topologies, is how does the data move through the enterprise and the pipelines. That helps companies see what's going on and what are, oftentimes they use it for what are opportunities to take advantage of the data as it moves through, use it for different use cases and such. So, for hybrid environments, the security and managing control, that's really one of the top scenarios.
That makes a lot of sense. And so Taylor, tell us a little bit about how you see customers evaluating the pros and the cons, the trade-offs of a suite approach versus a specialty tool.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a super common assessment you need to make when building, modernizing a data stack. And I think really it comes down to your bottom line as an organization, as a data team. What's most important to you when it comes to data infrastructure? So in today's market, we see a lot of teams who want to do more with less. So less overhead, less management of vendors, less stringing pipelines together from one tool to another. And the ultimate goal of data use cases, is some sort of business value. So meaning that the underlying data architecture or pipeline management is the tool that helps us get to this value or speeds that up. So there's the short term, I think, success metrics of this decision, which is what's going to get us to the quickest time to value for this use case. And the longer term success metrics, like what happens when we have more use cases? What does growth mean for pricing in our budget, in addition to how we're planning to scale our time to value for additional use cases? So I think there's a lot to think about when we're thinking about data infrastructure. Firstly, does it make sense to buy a separate tool for each data functionality, like ingestion, transformation, orchestration, monitoring? The list goes on. Now there's reverse ETL and data activation, or can we do more with less? And I think a feature-forward mindset is what ends up hurting us sometimes as technologists, because we are very quick to jump to the perfect technical solution and build all the architecture diagrams that we see as best practice before we understand what the real business problem, the real bottom line is for our use case, which for many teams these days and in this market is time to value and doing that with less.
Very interesting. Yeah, and there's always the classic trade-off of solving a near-term problem now and not creating technical debt with your decision today about what your future options are, not painting yourself in a corner. So Saket, your perspective at Nexla, there's a lot of talk about data products, oftentimes in the context of a data mesh, this architectural approach embracing distributed environments in which domain owners present their data as a product to the rest of the business. I'd love to hear your perspective on a data product, what it is, and what it means to a data pipeline or a data engineering team.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So, everything that all of us here are doing is ultimately in the service of the data user. How can everyone become a data user and every data user get ready to use data? Whether it's someone in HR analyzing compensation in a spreadsheet, or you're forecasting sales in CRM, or we are visualizing a marketing campaign performance in a BI tool. So data product is that entity of ready to use data for the data user that is trusted, that is validated, that is discoverable, and most importantly, it's consumable by the data user wherever they want to consume it in any tool, right? So the best way to understand data product, I think, is to just take an analogy with any product that we know of, right? So I'll give an analogy with shoes, for example. So products are made with raw materials. For shoes, it's fabric and leather. For data products, it's the data, the metadata, the descriptions, the validations that feed into the raw materials for data product, right? And I want to clarify here that data itself is a raw material and not the data product itself. So, all these descriptions, annotations, collaboration capabilities are part of the data product, okay? Now, someone produces a product as a data product, for example, for a particular purpose. The shoes, it's like, I need road biking shoes. So somebody produces, I can go find it. I can see the reviews. I can get it and use it. And the same thing goes up, applies for data products as well, is that it becomes easier for the data consumer to find and use the product, right? Now, in terms of pros and cons, I would say that I think it's way more collaborative, way more easy, way more, I would say, in line with the goal of data democratization to work with data products. And in terms of the cons, I would say that, not a whole lot, especially if you do it right. For example, we look at data products as logical data products. instead of making new copies of data, these data products just sit out there until somebody wants to use it, and then they know where to give the data out in the right sort of speed or format, right? So I think, to your last point, like, why am I talking data products in a pipeline discussion, right? If for a minute, we forget the traditional approach to pipelines and integration, and we just think about a data product centric view, then connecting to a data system and auto-generating a data product, for example, is no different from the capital E, which is extraction of data, okay? Deriving data products from existing data products is very much like transforming data, and then consuming the data product is very much like the L, okay? The benefit, of course, is that this becomes a much more composable way of thinking about things and working with data. And when you have logical products, it means that your underlying data flow can be batch, can be streaming, can be real time. So you've really decoupled the thought process about what happens with data and how it gets used from how this gets executed. So I think it's a very powerful approach to entire data management.
So Justin, I know that there's a lot that DataOps.live does with the creation, management, optimization of data products. Perhaps you could help us frame a lot of the topics we're talking about here in terms of evolving requirements. And what is a data ops program, and how does that help meet some of these evolving business requirements?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways, Kevin. There's the data requirements themselves in modern enterprises, and there's the business requirements. The data requirements being sort of those data obligations that you've got around security and governance and control. There's the business requirements around meeting stakeholder requirements and delivery expectations, and frankly, cost. Doing more with less. And I think in this regard, the whole discipline of data ops has been sort of a seismic change in the whole data world. And whenever I'm talking about data ops, I'm talking about true data ops. That 20-year battle-hardened discipline that we've had in the software world around DevOps, and bringing that into the data world and changing it. So I think, in looking at those two areas, the business requirements and the data requirements, I think if you look at DataOps and, what it's done and what it's doing for, both the discipline and the tooling, for modern data enterprise, it's providing them with the ability to, build data products better and faster, to have a better and a faster developer experience, giving them the frameworks to build faster. It's helping data product teams to parallelize across many developers, making changes to make sure that they don't step on each other's toes. It's finally bringing in the holy grail of automated regression testing, where we're putting tests as core elements as part of pipelines, and in the same way we've done with software for years, and ensure that our business stakeholders are not our testers. And that point that Taylor said about reducing costs, we all want to do more with less. We need efficiency. Our resources are most expensive. So, DataOps is really helping enterprises delivering that. But also in those data requirements, which is less about the agility and the productivity, it's more about your obligations around data. Then it's providing a lot of the methods to control the building of those products and those new pipelines and those data products, and the change process around that, the methods to enforce security and who's got access to what the data platform, and of course the audit trail around everything, to basically to be able to prove that you're meeting your obligations. And I think that's what DataOps is bringing to modern enterprises today. It's sort of both the discipline and the tooling is bringing that balance of agility and productivity to deliver on needs of stakeholders, and the governance and control to deliver on your obligations.
So Justin, let's add to that the notion of orchestration. I know that you've looked a lot at orchestration of pipelines and of third-party tools to manage a lot of these processes. What would you say are the key criteria that folks should evaluate when they're evaluating tools as it comes to orchestration of pipelines, of artifacts, and how they work with applications?
Yeah, it's a great question. Orchestration is critical, as you say, Kevin, because organizations need a control plane across all of their data pipelines. And that means a control plane that sort of spans all elements of a data pipeline and all tools. And so I think when you're looking at this areas, they're looking at this in terms of capabilities. I think there's two sets of capabilities. There's table stakes, the set of capabilities that any orchestrator should provide. And then there's the extended capabilities. You know, it's an advanced thinking organization that you're dealing with, and you're going to be supported into the future. So I think for table stakes, you know, we are talking about that control plane that orchestrates everything, not just internal functionality of the product. So orchestrating the ingestion elements, whether they're native or whether they're, you know, orchestrating Fivetran or Matillion or Azure Data Factory, orchestrating the transformation and modeling elements, the data quality elements, maybe Monte Carlo and Soda, and the data science. So all of those elements are key. Capabilities around a comprehensive logic framework, you know, deciding what to trigger and when, comprehensive scheduling capabilities, being environment aware, because data pipelines need to operate differently in production environments than they do in development environments and vice versa. A hybrid approach, so that they're not just orchestrating in the cloud, they're orchestrating behind firewalls and in the customer's own business, and metadata intelligence, so that the pipelines and the orchestrators are not just telling stuff what to do and when to do it, but they're harvesting back all of the log files, the error files, the telemetry, and all of that data. So that's really table stake for orchestrators. I think when you get into the extended capabilities, then you're really talking about, in fact, some of the stuff that Saket was talking about there. It's, you know, it's areas where you're starting to sort of drive the latest thinking in the data world. You know, ones that have first-class support for real data products. You know, that understand the need for a data product registry and support data product versioning and all of that. That understand the concepts of backward compatibility and alert you when you publish a new data product that's going to, you know, break downstream data products effectively, and understand this whole complex map of data product dependencies and the way that APIs might be dependent on each other. So orchestration is critical. It sounds simple, but it's significantly more complex than many people think. And it's not orchestration just related to whatever you have in your own product.
A lot of instrument players in an orchestra.
Yeah, there is indeed.
Use that analogy.
We use that analogy a lot.
There you go. So Mark, coming to you, if we look at product evaluation criteria for ingestion, what would you say? You talked about evolving criteria or evolving requirements, and I'm sure ecosystem support is critical, as is performance support of a lot of sources and targets. But what would be the top 2 or 3 criteria by which you see enterprises evaluating what they have when it comes to ingestion in particular?
Yeah, so like Justin, I'll start with the table stakes, right? Like, and this goes back to something Mike also alluded to, it's security, right? The platform has to be secure, and that is, again, table stakes. And then another aspect, which I consider table stakes, is the reliability of the platform, right? We build these data pipelines, they better work, right? Like, so that is an incredibly important requirement. And again, I think it's table stakes, but in practice, it turns out that data pipelines break all the time, and that is sad to see. So now going over then to the evaluation criteria, agree with Taylor, right? Like, the organizations want a single technology to address all their data sources, and with the multitude of those, source support, just the variety of sources we can support is I think the number 1 criteria. The second one is related to timeliness. Do we need the data real time? Like you talked in the keynote, it came up, Kevin, like what are the business requirements, right? But from a timeliness perspective, you always want your data as timely as possible. And then the last one that I nominate here is just the total cost of ownership. And that does go back to the reliability of the pipelines, because ultimately, if the pipeline is not available, first of all, it's not useful. But secondly, like, what are the processes to then go address it, and what is the cost of those? So those are my top 3 criteria: source support, timeliness, and total cost of ownership.
Okay, great stuff. And so, Saket, I'll put the question to you in terms of evaluation criteria and the degree to which you need multimodal support. There are a lot of flavors, a lot of sequences: ETL, ELT, reverse ETL, ETLT, I'm sure there are others. But what does that mean to evaluation criteria? My thought is enterprises need to be ready to support a lot or all of these to meet different requirements over time. But we would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, no, we work with some of the biggest enterprises out there, like JP Morgan and Johnson & Johnson, right? And they need all sorts of mechanisms. So I think from an enterprise perspective, on one hand, it looks like you need so many tools, one for each type of use case. But then if you really put thought from a technical perspective, data is going from point A to point B and at different velocities. That's all that is happening. And what you have is a different tool for everything. You go from a SaaS service to a warehouse is one tool, and from a warehouse back to a SaaS service is another tool. So I think when you think about the enterprise, they are definitely have concern that what is happening, if you look at the timeline, is right. Generation 1 was tools that was built for IT, and then came the generation 2, the modern data stack, I think, which was a no-code facade on top of the same set of tools. The challenge for the enterprise then becomes, the Gen 2 tools have been great. I mean, they have brought a lot of simplicity out there, right? But it is also like having basically a faster horse. And from the perspective of scalability, more data, more systems, more people, and sustainability of the strategy for the enterprise I think is one that's driving towards the edge of a cliff. So I think that what is happening is a Gen 3 on the horizon, what you, I think, mentioned as this multimodal sort of approach, and it's leading into tools that can really handle all of these use cases, move data from different systems to different systems with a lot of flexibility and ease. And I think, if you ask me, I think this is coming to the iPhone moment for the data tools, where instead of a Motorola and a Garmin and a BlackBerry and an iPod and a Nikon, each of them claiming to be best of breed, you get an iPhone which actually does all of these and better than any of them, right? And I think that's where we're heading into, is saying, let's take a new approach to solving the same problems. And actually, it can be done better. There's a lot of mature stack under the hood in terms of cloud and different technologies. And I think that's where we're headed. So I think enterprises are really looking at all of these things. Like, for example, Mark said, more connectors, they can now be auto-generated, okay? It is more collaboration. Yes, those data products are coming and helping, right? Multi-speed, yes, that is also happening. So, and total cost of ownership really, really comes down when you can converge many of these use cases into the same tool, same learning pattern, same no-code interface, just different sort of systems. And it's the people cost that's the highest when you have to deal with so much fragmentation. So I think that's where it's headed, in my opinion.
Fantastic. Okay. So Taylor, I'd love to hear your thought, your perspective. Rivery is doing a lot for cloud environments in particular, like others on the call, but what are some of the ways in which cloud-only environments or cloud-first environments start to reshape what the evaluation criteria are for data pipeline tools?
Yeah, I mean, I think, before the cloud and everything was on-premise, which meant everything was custom code or having some legacy ETL software installed on an on-premise server, you'd quickly run into limits of scale, and your kind of main requirements really centered around kind of some of the total cost of ownership items like Mark mentioned, in terms of reliability, et cetera. And with the cloud, it became a bit easier. Hardware could be quote unquote rented from cloud vendors for pipelines to be built on and software to run on. But there's still issues of scale when it comes to being automatic and aligning budgets with needs. So scaling to fit some need on demand, and then have kind of what I'm charged or the price model correlate directly with like the value that I'm consuming. So I think that's where SaaS pipeline tools come in, where it really kind of takes a lot of those requirements off the shelf in terms of reliability and total cost of ownership. And it just means actually thinking about the parts that, the parts that are custom to you in terms of getting value. So the types of sources you want to connect to, the destinations you have, and similar to kind of echo what Saket said, bringing data from point A to point B or back from B to A, really, it's just kind of these data movements in different shapes and forms. So I think when it comes to deciding on either whether it's like on-premise versus cloud or build versus buy, it's really a decision on what scale and agility means to your organization versus some other concerns of maybe data movement or hyper-customized pipelines. But I think SaaS removes a lot of the requirements that on-premise requires as table stakes, like we mentioned in some of the previous speakers. So I'd say the overall takeaway is that time to value is much quicker with kind of SaaS and cloud only than on-premise, since there's no upper limits to scale, and teams can be much more agile in their delivery of business value.
And great stuff. Thank you, Taylor. And so kind of building on that, you've got cloud environments, multi-cloud, hybrid environments, the need to synchronize data across these heterogeneous environments. And Mike, I'd love your perspective on the notion of data drift. StreamSets, now part of Software AG, was founded about a decade ago. You can correct me on this, with a real focus on, among other things, data drift. And what that means in all its forms. I would argue data drift matters more now because there are things like data drift that changes machine learning model outputs. What is data drift, and what does that mean to the mix here in terms of tool requirements?
Succinctly, shift happens with data. So things change, and that's in a short. It's all the change that happens, and Mark mentioned it, and it's just pipelines break. Well, why do they break? Like the data formats change, metadata changes, schema changes. I mean, that's the one I think most people think of with data drift, and it's very common, and everyone here is able to sense and adapt to that. But it's infrastructure changes, and it's a capability, as we have patents. StreamSets has patents on this, is the ability to sense and automatically adapt to the changes so that the pipelines continue to run, but people are alerted to these changes. And that's another area where we help people understand is like, hey, here's what's changing in your environment. Do you want to do something about that? Is it an opportunity to operate differently? And, it's Taylor had mentioned that, you look at on-premise and you're moving into the cloud. On-premise systems, even though people think of them as oftentimes think of them as fairly static, they're not. Those are continually changing too. And as systems are turned off, that's a change, for example. And, you have batch pipelines, you have streaming pipelines. How do you adapt? How do you capture all that? How do you keep your pipelines running through all that change? And that's managing data drift. That's fundamentally what it's about.
Excellent. Okay. We have 5 folks here. You've all been very respectful of each other, which I appreciate. And I will say that if there are things you want to key off one another in terms of comments, we can do that too. This is obviously a conversation too. I do have one final set of questions I can put to folks, but I'll just pause. It looks like we have some questions coming in from the audience, and we're going to handle that during the dedicated Q&A section that will start at 1:15 Eastern. But please keep it coming in. Great. And Saka, thank you already for engaging on some of that. Okay, so why don't we'll go around the horn here, and I'll ask each of you the same question, which is, what differentiates your product in the landscape, and what that means to enterprises? So we'll start alphabetical order. Justin, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So this is the pitch session, right?
This is the pitch session.
We get it out there. Okay, great. Look, I'll kick it off. Look, I think for us, we may differ from some of our other colleagues in a number of areas. I think, first of all, if anyone's looked at us today, we've honed our technology very specifically for Snowflake. So we've got very, very deep integration into Snowflake core functions, into environment automation, how you can sort of build and manage every element of Snowflake in a declarative fashion. And that's very, very unique to us. So that'd be one area. I think a second area would be our North Star is data developer experience, how data developers enjoy it, and as a consequence, how productive they are. So we make a strong play in that. We make data developers as productive as their software counterparts, and we've got a cloud-hosted data development environment that really enables that. I talked about orchestration earlier, and that whole area of automation and orchestration is very key to DataOps.live. And we don't mean just the automation and orchestration of what of what, lots of people talk about it, but they talk about it in terms of what they do inside their product. We talk about it in terms of the entire control plane, orchestrating other products that are important, a Talent or a Fivetran or a Matillion within that plane. Similar to Saket, data products is a core element of DataOps.live, so it's a first-class citizen. We support the definition, the metadata about them, the versioning, the dependency maps, and everything. So we're, some of the most advanced capabilities, I would say, in this area. And I think finally, and maybe most importantly, it's that sort of the combination of speed of adoption and being designed to scale. We've got companies like Roche who've adopted us in 4 weeks and now run 50 data teams and 70 data products and are doing up to 200 releases a month. And these are things that we are unheard of in the data world historically. 200 releases a month, most organizations did 1 release a quarter. So I think those would be the main areas that we would feel that highlight our uniqueness.
Great stuff. Okay, Mark, what differentiates Fivetran?
Yeah, so great question, and you'll get my biased opinion. First of all, I think we cover the widest spectrum of data sources, and Kevin, you would understand this because you work with Click at Unity. We compete against the Unity when it's about database replication, and so we see that, and we see Rivery all day, every day when it's related to SaaS applications. But with Fivetran, we can cover that entire spectrum of all the way from SaaS to high volume databases and everything that's in between. So I think that is the first major differentiator. Then we also, with Fivetran, cover different deployment options. So customers can run with the fully managed service, but there's also options to run in the local environment, and even the most security conscious customers can run our software, our technologies completely disconnected from the internet. So look at the spectrum of sources and then the deployment options you have. And then lastly, I would say we integrate really well with adjacent technologies. Of course, Justin, I understand you're built for Snowflake. We integrate with Snowflake as well as a number of other partners. But then we also look at the metadata spectrum with the various data catalog providers. We work with the BI vendors from an integration perspective. We provide data lineage, etc. So 3 things: the variety of sources, the deployment options, and then the integration in the ecosystem.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. And yes, I agree that supporting the on-prem stuff in particular matters for so many enterprises that will never quite get away from it. Okay, so good. So Saket, you're up next, and maybe you could talk about what differentiates Nexla.
Yeah, Nexla approach, started at the very top of the enterprise land, which is why companies like JP Morgan, Johnson & Johnson, LinkedIn, and DoorDash use us with mission critical data. And it is now bringing that same high quality technology and automation, down to the mass market. So that's where what we're doing right now. I would say the key benefit of Nexla is the same no-code, low-code interface for any type of data integration that you need. So it's a better way of doing that. But then, there are 2 things that happen alongside, and we call it, one is automation and one is collaboration. These are the 2 different approaches to scaling. So one, automation becomes auto-generated connectors, for example. So you're no more limited by, DoorDash, signs up a new merchant, no matter what API, what format, what structure, connect it, no code. And then the collaboration, which means that you have those data products that are getting generated automatically. You're doing the integration, but the side effect is data products. They are collaborative. We actually last week launched a private marketplace capability for data products. So any company can create an internal marketplace, have your data products, let people find it and go use that. The last thing I would say about interoperability, which Mark brought up, is essential in the ecosystem. There are so many tools out there. 2 things that we are doing. One is everything is open in Nexla. You can see everything as a JSON manifest. Every single API that my developer team has is available to our users. So that's the other part. And then there's a 3rd component to it, interoperability. So while it is no code, low code for all the data users, it is a complete SDK and command line interface for the engineers. So we are creating collaboration between the engineers and the data users together. So ultimately, I think the only way enterprises scale is when things that they're doing already can be done with automation, greater reliability and simplicity, and it can be done collaboratively, which means more people can participate in that and do the bit that they care about without back and forth dependencies between each other.
Very good. Okay, thank you, Sake. So Taylor, from a Rivery perspective, tell us your pitch.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, we operate in a few spaces, so to speak. So covering data ingestion, transformation, and orchestration, and also the pushback of data back to source systems. So I think one is and echoing, I think what a few have already said, but kind of the ease of use with a lot of power. So Rivery users enjoy the no-code, low-code experience throughout all of our native integrations and GUI, but also ask for flexibility as well. So hence why we're API first and offer lots of customizations, like the ability to run like fully managed Python, in addition to the SQL transforms, and connect and push back to any source. So I think it's that kind of marriage of ease of use and robustness and flexibility. And next would be faster delivery and management. So Rivery is a complete SaaS ELT platform. So it gives our customers the ability to go to market faster and have better transparency over their pipeline, end-to-end pipeline statuses and costs, as well as scale faster across multi-tenant environments and ready-to-go templates of pipelines that we call kits. So I'd say, to wrap it up, Rivery is the complete ELT platform that enables data teams to do more with less, so less overhead in less time, and to get to business value quickly and with agility.
Fantastic. Okay, and so Mike, last but not least, StreamSets,
great,
which has interesting touch points with your parent Software AG. Excuse me.
Yeah, and it is great to go last. And I hope folks here by the way, is a great panel. You'll hear a lot. We're all platforms, and there is overlapping, but we all do subtly different things. You're going to hear from StreamSets is we are, our unique capability. It is the platform that can do any type of integration, batch streaming, CDC in one environment. So it's same canvas. We do low code, no code, or code, because a lot of people do want to work with custom libraries and bring those into their pipelines. Work with structured, unstructured, and files. I tell folks a lot is files are commonly the lingua franca for how data is passed around the enterprise and even between businesses. We're uniquely able to do that. And then ability to integrate with modern and legacy systems. And this comes in from an asset that we got through our acquisition with Software AG, or Software AG's acquisition of us, is getting to legacy systems like mainframes. And when we look at the broader Software AG capabilities, I'm excited about our future. Is Software AG has integration of applications, integration of process, integration of IoT, and then we complement that. And I would say it's kind of the final piece is integration of data.
Very good. Okay. I can't resist throwing the firecracker into the midst here of ChatGPT and getting thoughts on what, if anything, it means to your business. We have 3 boys. I have a 16-year-old who loves to give advice to our 9-year-old. And he's kind of like ChatGPT because he'll give cognitively sound advice, but you really need to govern the judgment that he's imparting. And it seems that ChatGPT is similar. It needs a lot of governance, but could improve productivity. I would love to hear thoughts from your perspective based on what data engineers are or are not doing with ChatGPT as it pertains to your product. I'll open it up.
I'll go.
I'm happy to go. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, we're saying it's experimental phase, right? I mean, there's a lot of promise, and I think we're still at the space where people are figuring it out. I was around when the internet hit in the early 90s, and people didn't quite know what to do with it, but everyone had to have a web server. So we're seeing people figure it out. I myself, there are things about it I love. I think you mentioned the best part is folks need to come to it with a ability to assess what it provides back, because it needs to be governed. So that's where we are right now.
Maybe I'll go and address the ChatGPT question in the context of pipelines and our ecosystem. And I think it's a very powerful technology, and I'm super excited about it. And there are many reasons for that. When we talk about no code, we understand that when you have very few controls to keep it easy, you also have to compromise on capability. But there's a reason, a Boeing 737 has so many buttons. It's a complex machinery, and sometimes data is complex, and you can't make it no code entirely. So the ability of generative AI to be able to generate low code from simple descriptions, I think, is fundamentally powerful in what it can enable data users to do without having to be programming. We have been testing some of these things where our ability to generate descriptions about data products from simply consuming the data, and we're seeing that it can be very powerful as well. So there are a lot of things that can be done like that. It also seems like there are some very promising capabilities of ChatGPT and generative AI in general, in terms of how it can make the data much more accessible and approachable to the end user, and simplify the barriers of technology and complexity that keep people away from being able to become data users. So I'm personally pretty excited about what can happen with this.
The only thing sorry, Mark, the only thing I would add on building on what Zach had said is, we're doing a lot of work internally in terms of how we can make the data product developers experience easier and better and quicker. So how, of course, everyone can generate all of these complex statements and everything else, but if we can feed these into generative AI and it takes a lot of the heavy lifting out of doing it, of course, that makes the whole experience a lot better and quicker and whatever. So we've got a lot of work internally going on around how we can embed ChatGPT as a core part of the developer productivity experience. All right, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'd say from our technology's point of view, we work a lot with structured data, and we work a lot in, let's say, industries where the accuracy of the data truly matters, and some systems need to be like SOC compliant, etc. And there's got to be evidence that even though the data was replicated, that it is actually identical to the source. And from this point of view, Kevin, I second your thought related to your 16-year-old. Like, there's got to be governance, right? Like, and I think certainly for some of these systems where it's structured data and the accuracy is critically important, I don't know that ChatGPT is going to provide a difference anytime soon. However, for more of the unstructured data and where the sheer volume of the data is incredible, to some of what Zach had mentioned, right? Like, that's where I think it's very exciting that we might have a productivity gain here to look forward to.
We live in very interesting times. And I think Wayne is back. This is great. Thank you very much for everyone for thoughtful commentary. It made me a little smarter, so I appreciate that. And I'm sure others on the line agree. Wayne, why don't I hand over to you?
Yeah, great panel, great discussion. Thanks, everyone.